Welcome to Women and Resistance, a powerful podcast where we honor the courage, resilience, and revolutionary spirits of women across the globe. Hosted by Ayafuberi Eneli Esquire and Adesoji Iginla, we uncover untold stories of defiance against systemic oppression, whether colonialism, racism, sexism, or economic injustice. From historic icons like Winnie Mandela and Fannie Lou Hamer to today's trailblazers, we shine a light upon those shaping a more just world. This is a call to honor the past, embrace the present, and build an empowered future. Yes. Greetings, and welcome to another episode of Women and Resistance. I am your host, Adesoji Iginla, and with me as usual, before she goes into character, is Ayafuberi Eneli Esquire. Welcome.
Thank you.
So this week, I suppose we have to propose this conundrum. Imagine this. In the 1880s, you're an enslaved woman. You've already buried the idea of freedom, or had it buried for you. You have given birth to 9 children. You know what it means to have your body treated as property, your love treated as a liability, and then your youngest, your conjoined twin daughters, barely 10 months old, are sold, not to a neighbor, not even to someone in the same state, nor the same country, but they're sold to a showman, exhibited, bought, stolen, traded, kidnapped, and eventually trafficked across the Atlantic Ocean to England. That is the story of Monemia McKoy, and that's the story we're looking at today. So welcome.
Thank you.
For those who are probably just coming across your story for the first time, could you just take us to the beginning, as in who is Monemia and how did this story come to be?
Good evening.
Good evening.
It's a pleasure to be here. My name has been written in many ways. Some have remembered me as Monemia. Some have written my name as Movenia. I was an enslaved woman. When I tell the story of what happened to my children, it is different and yet the same from the stories of what happened to me and my people. See, my mother was not what they will call a full Negro. In my blood from my mother's side, there was some Indian, and there was also some white blood, and there was also some African blood, because my grandmother had been raped by a white man. Much later, people would talk about my children and the nature of their hair as they began to dig into who they are and where they came from. I was born enslaved, and I was married to another man who also was enslaved. I was enslaved in Columbus County, North Carolina, near a place today that is still called Whiteville, on the land of a man called Jacob McKoy. But my husband was Jacob McKoy. By the time my children, who would make my name even one that anybody would want to know, were born, I had already had 8 other children. All of us, my husband and I and our children, all belonging to someone else. Back then, when the white owners would vote, and of course, just the white men, because even their women did not have the right to vote. They could cast 1 vote for themselves, and then they would cast 3/5 votes for every Negro man they had enslaved. And so 1 white man could have 4 votes, 5 votes, 10 votes, just depending on how many of my people they enslaved. We were listed as chattel on invoices, on sales receipts, put up as collateral for loans and the like, while we could still be counted for voting purposes, but not for our own means. And we carried along in this manner, not knowing when the dark night of slavery would end. It was 1851, and I was pregnant again. Nothing unusual. In fact, our owners liked for us to stay pregnant because that actually enriched them. There was nothing much unusual with this pregnancy, or even initially with the birth. And it was Hannah, a trusted midwife, Negro woman who attended to all of us when we went into labor, who first saw the child presenting with their stomach first. That child we named Christine. We called her Chrissy. But as the child came out and Hannah attempted to get the afterbirth out, there presented another child. This one breached. Goodness. Twins, 2 heads, 2 faces, 2 cries, 4 arms and 4 legs, but 1 body co-joined at the lower spine. What is going on? Most were not sure how to respond, but I saw my daughters. I did not see curiosity. I did not see wonder. I did not see the freaks they were called. I saw Christine and I saw Millie. Millie was smaller and the one who came second. Christine was stronger and the one who came first. Weighed together, they weighed about 17 pounds, with Christine being the much larger of the two. They checked again. Could it really be that they are joined? Yes, they are. I called them a miracle, even though the world saw it as impossible. Should they be even allowed to live? I took my daughters and I wrapped them and I fed them. I knew from birth how intelligent they were, for their eyes would follow me. I learned how to turn them to keep them comfortable, for they were connected right at the base of their spines and from their pelvic area. So everything was two, except they shared a pelvis and they shared their lady parts. I loved and cared for my children, but already Master Jabez was already thinking about how to capitalize on my children. Some of you may know the prayer of Jabez, "O Lord, that you may enlarge my territory." And perhaps that is what he saw when he saw my children. Remember, this was a time when white people routinely had human zoos and all other kinds of ways that they would exploit those that they thought to be different. Slavery did not just steal the labor of my husband and I and our children. Slavery also stole our right as parents to protect our children. When my girls were just 10 months old, Jabez McKoy sold them. It is my understanding that the agreement was that I, their mother, would stay with them. They were still just babies. He sold them for $1,000. Sold to a man named John C. Purvis. Today, as I say that name, maybe Purvis short for perverted, but he wasn't the only one. Later, my children would be sold again, passed into the hands of showmen, managers, promoters, men who did not see their humanity, but just saw ticket sales. And in order to justify people buying these tickets, they would examine my children with less care than one might examine a hog or a horse or a mule. When my children were stolen and carted off, I cannot impress upon you the wound. For weeks, I couldn't eat and I couldn't sleep, crying for my babies. Breasts still full of milk, breasts that remembered the mouths of my children. The arms still remembering the weight of my babies. My ear constantly tuned to their cries, but I could not hear their cries. What will they do with my children? It's bad enough when we're sold off and you believe somewhere they are alive, enslaved but alive. But what would they do with my miracles? It would be a long time before we would get any word about where my babies were. Taken from North Carolina, moved through, and finally all the way to Canada. But that was not far enough. Eventually, they boarded a ship to Liverpool. They took my babies and called it business. For them, they were just an opportunity to make a lot of money. For others, it was a depravity hiding behind the term science. What would you call it for a mother aching for her children while others counted out their money? My girls were taken to fairs. Have you gone to a fair lately? What do you see at fairs?
Noise.
Shown to crowds like you will some kind of prize animal. They were pointed at, measured, pictures of their genitalia drawn, supposedly for scientific purposes. Every city in which they would be exhibited, the first cause of action would be to gather doctors and people of the scientific field, and they would be given access to, in their words, examine my daughters so that they could vouch for their monstrosity. I would wake up at night in a cold sweat, so sure that I had heard my daughters. Eventually, Mr. Smith paid a handsome price for my daughters before they were stolen from him. He decided to leave no stone unturned to get them back. These proverbial cash cows. When he found out that my children were in England, a place where slavery had been abolished, he and his attorney figured that if they took me to England with them, I could reclaim my children, as their abductors would not be able to provide any proof that they were indeed the legal guardians. Of course, at this time, they had woven so many stories around my daughters, that they were born in Africa, that they were being cared for. They did come from America, but they were working to be able to buy their parents from slavery. And so every ticket bought was to help my daughters achieve their goal. All manipulation. In 1853, when my daughters were just 2 years old, at a North Carolina's first state fair, thousands came through each day. If you paid a little bit more, you could look under their skirts. Freaks of nature, they called them. But I tell you today, as sure as I am of anything, nature and God had not been cruel to my daughters. People were. It was in New Orleans that they were abducted from a man named Brower, who had abducted them from Mr. What is a mother to make up these news? My stolen children have been stolen again? Imagine this, toddlers, girls, enslaved girls, joined together. Where could they run? Where could they hide? Unable to decide who touched them and how. Who watched them, who bought a ticket, who examined them. Then they disappeared again. And then in 1854, they reappeared in Philadelphia in a museum. A museum. Is that a place for two living beings? But for black bodies in that century, a museum could be a stage with velvet, a stage, a cage on the stage with velvet curtains. Years passed. I'm still working for my enslaver. So is my husband. So are our other children. Joseph Pearson Smith, the legal owner, through business dealings of my children, took me along with him to England to reclaim my daughters. I crossed that ocean, not knowing what to expect, but aching to see my children again. I was not a free woman, although it is amazing being in this black body. Because once I crossed over to England, I was now supposedly free. except they had my daughters. Therefore, they had me. And back home, they had my husband and my other children. Therefore, I was not free. We had to go to court, and the kidnappers were actually making a case to keep my daughters. But when the judge took one look at me and looked at the face of Christine, who looked more like me, they said they needed no further proof that I was indeed the mother of the girls. And so, my daughters were returned, at least temporarily, to my care. I stayed with them for a while, and indeed, they continued to be exhibited, for someone had to pay for the cost of this trip. Eventually, Mr. Smith, according to them, drafted a contract that I agreed to for him to keep the girls and for them to continue to be exhibited across Europe while I returned to North Carolina. Contract that I agreed to. Understand that much of what is known about me and my daughters was not written by us, although my daughters did write a biography, like my sister, who was exhibited in England as well, decades before my daughters, who also, it is said, signed a contract. What does your common sense lead you to believe? Understanding the times in which we lived. My daughters were 5 years old when I was reunited with them. Changed. They had been educated by a suffering that they never fully gave words to. Their bodies still joined. Their eyes were still mine. They had figured out how to walk and to run. They could speak multiple languages. And even though it had been years since they had seen me, they knew me. They still knew their mama. We did return to North Carolina, where they were reunited with the rest of our family. But the story was far from over. In our family, we did not treat them as freaks of nature. They were Millie and Chrissy, called them my girls. Sometimes they referred to themselves as she or they, depending, but they were my daughters. Our reunion and our time as a family was not to last too long. And at this point, my daughters will tell the rest of their story. Give us a second to get ready. You know, we are known all across the globe. We met princes and the queen and dukes and duchesses. Now, I'm Millie. I'm the more artistic one. I'm Christine. I did almost all of our correspondence. I'm also the stronger one. When we were kids, I learned how to carry Millie here on my back. But they told us not to do that too much, especially as we got older, because Millie actually got stronger. Yes, I did get stronger. And I was always the one who had the more sense. Talking about sense, on almost all the advertisements about us, the thing they would focus on, well, once they got past the monstrosity part of it, was how intelligent we were. What did you expect? And I know till today, there are some who are still marveled at the intelligence of anyone who appears Negro to them. We wrote poems. I'm Millie speaking, by the way. And I would always say to Chrissy, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, Chrissy. They eventually wrote a book about us, and that's exactly what they titled it. But I dictated quite a bit to Chrissy. Chrissy always had great penmanship. Yes, Millie. And sometimes you would talk so fast as though you couldn't figure out that I actually had to write everything down. At any rate, Millie and I, we were never bored because we always had each other. But Millie was the one with the temper. For the most part, everyone always talked about how amiable we were. Just how wonderful it was to be around us. Yes, we had to be amiable. I would say, looking back now, it was partly our disposition from God because, yes, we are miracles indeed. But also, when you had to grow up under the circumstances that we did you not have to find some kind of armor with which to protect yourself?
Yeah.
And being amiable and agreeable and likable certainly helped us out more times than I can count. Now imagine where we lived. pulled away from our mother at such a young age, away from anyone we knew. We had different, I suppose you would call them nannies today. There was actually even a lady from Cuba, and she was so good to us. She took care of us as best she could. But we understood that our value was in making the people around us happy, entertaining them. Well, Chrissy, you gonna let me talk at all? Well, I will. Just hold on. We had at least 2 shows a day, just like you would barn animals. And so we had the afternoon show. So in the morning, we would get ready and we had to learn our songs and our dances, and we could dance. I was the better dancer. I was always the artistic one. We worked well together. You know that. Yes, we did. Well, we had a performance in the afternoon, and those ones would typically be for the children and for the women, the ladies. And then no sooner was that done, we would have to go and get ready for the evening performance. We were kids performing for 8 hours and more a day, and that did not include all the time spent preparing. And this was our life, 6 days a week. You could say they invested in us, couldn't you, Chrissy? I mean, we learned to speak French and Spanish and German, and we sang songs in all of those languages, and we really perfected our dance steps. I didn't too much mind that, but every time we got to a new place, Chrissy would say, Millie, we gotta go. No, I don't want to. They just wanted to touch. I guess a polite way would be to say they examined us, they poked us, they fingered us. It was horrible. Calm down, Millie. You know we have to do this. I don't want to be calm. I hate it. And you do too. And you feel it as I do. Now, let me tell you a funny part about how we were built. Did you know that if you pinched Millie, wouldn't know? I couldn't feel it if you pinched her arm or if you touched the side of her face. And we could never see each other because the way our bodies were conjoined, we were turned away from each other. Now, we did eventually contort ourselves enough to where we could almost walk like a V, but we could not really see each other. And it was a curious thing to the observers that if you touched Millie's arm, Christine, couldn't feel it. But if you tickled my toes, Millie would laugh as well. So we had combined feeling from our pelvis down, but from our pelvis upwards, we were 2 different people, 2 fully formed brains. As a matter of fact, one of our acts was there would be this person over here having a whole conversation with Christine, me, and there would be someone else over here having a totally different conversation with Millie. And we could have those conversations separately and simultaneously for hours.
You are listening to Women and Resistance with Aya Fubera Eneli Esquire and Adesoji Iginla, where we honor the voices of women who have shaped history through courage and defiance. If you're finding these stories inspiring, take a moment to subscribe, share, and support this platform. Together, we amplify the voices that deserve to be heard. Now, back to the conversation.
But you know what? There would come a time when we would both say the same sentence at the exact same time. I tell you, we were fearfully and wonderfully made. Mostly we ate the same things all the time, but we really did have different interests sometimes. Like I said, I was the writer. And like I said, I was the artistic one. Well, we were both artistic. It certainly wasn't all fun and games. Although the way we were created gave us opportunities probably no other enslaved Black girl or boy in the entire history of the United States of America ever had. Suppose you got to treat the cash cows well. People would always come and they say, well, they look happy. Well, for the most part, we were, especially after 1865.
Why so?
See, we were truly free then because the Emancipation Proclamation had declared me and my people free. We didn't bring up any topics that would create any offense for our audience. We were just amiable, but we were aware.
Justice.
And at age 14, when we realized we were now in charge of ourselves, we made a deal. By the way, see Christine's earrings? But these are mine. Okay, so what we agreed on was from then on, we keep a percentage of our own earnings. And we could read and write, and we paid attention exactly to our earnings. And we decided we were going to take care of our family back home. We continued to tour. We were seen in so many places. Sometimes the insults got to us. But here's another thing we decided. Christine, if you're going to tell the story, you've got to tell it all the way true. Well, still, Millie, we decided, but yes, you insisted. Millie said, under no circumstances, ever, 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 would anyone get to examine us. And that was that. Yes, because once I make up my mind is made up. Well, Mr. Smith had died. I forgot to tell you that part because I got so excited about something else. Well, Chrissy, maybe I should tell this part because you had your chance. I was always the more serious of the two of us. So at a time when we went back to North Carolina, Mr. Smith died quite suddenly, and he left in his will really everything to his wife. But then he had all these debts that needed to be paid off. So they came and they inventoried everything in the home. The gold teaspoons and the piano on which Mr. Smith used to play and sing. He did have a great singing voice. And they inventoried all the chattel, including me and my family. We were listed as being worth $25,000, and his total estate was worth about $69,000. Well, that also included about 28 other enslaved Black people. What do you think happened to pay the debts off? They started selling off some of the people. They did not sell any of my family, maybe because they had to keep the cash cows happy, I suppose. I don't know. Christine, now you know Ma Smith was good to us. That's what they wrote. And who's alive to argue the point now? You know, when white people tell the story, they always have to come out looking good. Now, I won't lie. Actually, I don't have to. Yes, Ma Smith was nicer to us than I suppose she needed to be, or could have been. But this whole idea of we wrote that we had two mothers? Oh, well. Okay, so, Chrissy, I'm going to finish the story. So, Ma Smith was in a tough place financially, and we said we can help. We can go back on the road and make some money. But we weren't just thinking about Ma Smith. We were also thinking about our family. Because if we made the money that allowed them not to sell our family, then our family could be together. And what a road trip that was. You can't actually call it a road trip. You would have to call it a river trip. We were on the Mississippi River, and there are all kinds of mishaps and people. And this was before 1865, because, you know, Chrissy skipped that part. And part of what we would see on that trip would be other Black people chained in chain gangs and shackled and ferried across in pens with the animals. And you better believe that we knew that all that kept our brothers and sisters and our parents from the same fortune might be what we are able to do and earn. And so we sang and danced and smiled, and we had the most amazing pearly whites. They would write about it all the time. They would write about our twinkling eyes and our pearly whites, and they would dress us up. And sometimes our hair were in ringlets, and sometimes we had, just ornaments and things, and flowers and posies. But 1865, with our emancipation, we said, now we get to take control of our lives. But we still needed a manager, someone who was good with the business of exhibition.
Mhm.
But you've got to wonder, what is it about a people that revel so much in what they called monstrosities? Our lives growing up, sometimes we were exhibited with giant women and giant men and bearded women and dwarfs and, whatever they could find out in nature, anyone who looked different. It taught us a lot because in close quarters with all of those people, you just realized we all wanted to be loved. And we eventually attended the wedding of two giants. And when they had their children, their first child was a giant as well. Unfortunately, their second child died. I never knew what eventually happened to them. But they were our family. Okay, Millie, can I speak now? You can always speak. We can both speak at the same time. Want to try it? No, we're not going to do that tonight. Okay, so we continued to travel around the world, and then we eventually came back to the United States of America, and we traveled with Barnum's Museum. And at this time, of course, we were getting older. We were almost 30 years old. Now, we had an unfortunate incident when we were still teenagers, but after our emancipation, where we had an abscess. We did everything we could not to be seen by a doctor. But it hurt so bad. Millie just wouldn't let us see a doctor. Yes, because they would always, what they did. Well, we had to. And it was a Dr. Pancoast who we eventually allowed him to examine us. It wasn't enough for them to have artists who would draw our genitalia. They wanted to now take pictures. I said no. Christina said, let's get it over and done with. And so there is a picture. You can probably find it on this thing you guys call the internet. Tell it, because Millie still can't stand that it happened. It's a picture of us, naked from the waist down. We had on knee-high socks and laced-up boots, but Millie insisted on cloths to cover our chests. And if you see that picture and you pay close attention, my head was hung down in shame. Millie's face was held up and indignant. She was fit to be tied. But we had so much pain and we really did need some medical assistance. They said it was a fistula, probably from where our bodies were trying to make another hole, but instead this had abscessed over time. It had to be taken care of. Now, I do want to say this about us. Where they may have seen us as freaks, we saw ourselves as miracles. And we did everything to perfect our art. We were performers. We were not just on exhibition. And today, you all pay a handsome price to go and see people perform. And that's what we evolved ourselves into. Not the two-headed nightingale, which they called us because we sang so well. Not the African two-headed beasts, which initially some would call us, but as two very cultured, talented young women. And that is how we carried ourselves. And we wanted to bring pride to our race and to our people. Now, we used our savings and we bought the entire plantation that my parents worked and on which we were born. We bought that plantation for our family. And we sent money home and we built ourselves a grand old house. And yes, I was in charge of choosing the furnishings and decorating the home just to our liking. We even sued at a time when we felt like we were being libeled. Like, you don't get to do that to us. We are human beings as well. There was a concern about what happens to conjoined twins, because there was a Hungarian set of twins that were conjoined and they only lived till they were 21. And then they were the Siamese twins, Chang and Eng, who also performed for a long time, and they too saved their money and bought a farm. They got married and they had children, each of them. Yes, they did. Now, we never chose to. But the concern always was, can co-joined twins ever be separated? Now, in the case of Chang and Eng, it was really just like a 3-inch band, they said, that connected them. And they thought it had stretched out enough and maybe they could separate them. But it never happened because it was still too risky. But the fear was always, if one twin died, the other will follow right after. And Chang, who had become an alcoholic, who knows, maybe he drank just to deal with the effort that it took to always be on display. He died first, and Ang kind of panicked and lost his mind, and he succumbed shortly after. Well, in their case, after they died, even though they had sworn their family to never exhibiting them again, no, here come these scientific folk, and they take their bodies and they still wanted to examine and experiment and exhibit and all of that. That was never going to happen to us, right, Sissy? We agreed. We were going to do everything to make sure that didn't happen. Yes, because I would rise from my grave and hunt anyone. We were already exhibited as human beings walking this earth. We were going to have our peace and death. Well, we soon left show business after we felt we had saved enough money. Our families were free and we're now working our own land, and we retired to our own home. And let me tell you, we were committed to making a difference. Would you like to know some of the work that we did?
Please do.
We donated, we helped build schools and churches for our community. We wanted to make sure that all the Black kids had the opportunities that we had without having to give up their lives in the ways that we did. We gave money to Shaw University, to Johnson C. Smith University. We gave money to Bennett College. We funded so many different programs and opportunities for our community because it was important to us. Henderson Institute was one, Palmer Institute, and most of the time we would give this money and they would not even know where the money came from, because what was important was the work that needed to be done and not that we got any kind of accolades for it. This is what we did, and we were devout Christians. In 1912, well, it was about 1911, when Millie got really sick. Yeah, see, that house that we had built, well, there was a little issue, and the house went up in flames. Now, we made it out of the house, but all of our memorabilia and all of the items that we had brought back from all our travels around the world, they went up in flames. Now, my sister Clara, our sister, she used to take care of us, and she got out as well. But the house itself could not be saved. Well, we were sitting out there on a trunk, shivering in the cold as we watched that house burn. And I do believe that's when I got that cold that I just never shook. We built a home, a cottage, about 6 rooms, but I could not get rid of that cold. I coughed so bad, it would keep Chrissy up at night. The doctors came and they told us what we knew but did not want to admit. Looks like I had tuberculosis. Chrissy, you were so brave. You never once stopped caring for me, even when I would keep you up all night. Millie, like what else would you expect? We are one soul, 2 heads, 2 brains. We are one soul. We went away to a sanatorium. That's what they used to do for people with tuberculosis to see if I could get cured, but I didn't. And so we returned to our home. Everyone knew the end was near. The United African Twins, the 2-headed nightingales, the devout Christians, the philanthropists, Christine, the one in charge of correspondence. You know, there was a census. It was the first census that we had been around for. Now, at this point in the United States history, there had been 13 census taken. This was the 5th one in which Black people could be counted as a whole person. When they came to us, do we count as 1 or 2? Now, we would often speak of ourselves in the plural. We said we, but we also felt as one person. And we definitely, even if the technology, the science would allow, we did not want to be to be severed, to be separated. This is what God decreed for us, and we were in agreement with it. We were Millie, Christine. 2 minds, 2 temperaments, 1 shared life. Well, it was 1912, and we could feel that the time was drawing near. We had been faithful with everything that life had thrown at us. We had found a way to make something of not just our lives, but to make the lives of others better. The doctor was summoned, and everybody sat in wake. I was the first one to notice that Millie had passed peacefully in her sleep. The doctor had sent a message to the governor of the state asking for permission to make me comfortable as I waited my turn to die. The governor said, give her as much morphine as needed. Some say I lingered for 8 hours, some say 17. Nonetheless, I did breathe my last breath. We were called many things: Carolina Twins, United African Twins, 2-headed girl, 2-headed nightingale. We were even called the 8th wonder of the world. Of course, we were called other names that I choose not to use at this time. Do not remember us as a spectacle. Remember our songs. Remember that we turned imbalance into dance. You know, our 2 outer legs were the stronger ones, and our inner legs were strong, but not as strong. We really did learn to move as one. Remember that we made art from what the world tried to mock. Remember that when the crowd came to stare, we made them listen. Do not remember us as freaks of nature. Remember our words. Remember our letters. Remember our choices, our refusals, our philanthropy. Remember that we gave to schools because the future of Black children mattered more than the curiosity of white audiences. We were many things. The daughters of Jacob and Monemia McKoy. We were aunties. We wrote up our will, and we left our estate to our nieces, 4 of them. And we made them promise that we would not be exhibited in death. In fact, we wanted to be cremated just to make sure that no grave robbers came and took us. Well, my great-nephew, Fred McCoy, when we died, they buried us in a specially made coffin. And he kept watch. He paid for a watch person to keep watch over our graves for 9 straight months. It would be decades later that we would be dug up. At that point, we truly had turned back into dust. There was just very little left of our bones. And there was that conjoined vertebrae. And they recovered our rings, and they put us in another pine box that remains, and they buried us in a cemetery that you can still visit today with a big tombstone. And today there's actually a marker as you approach Whiteville. It says the Carolina Twins, 5 miles down. And wouldn't you believe it? When Fred died in 1983, they buried him not too far from us, where he's still keeping watch over our graves. We are Millie and Christine McKoy, and we thank you for listening to our story tonight.
Yes, thank you for highlighting the the pains of Black people in the United States, or what will become the United States, and the crushing machinery that is American racial capitalism, because we see it in all forms. We saw the slavery angle, the legal coercion, institutional betrayal, but the mother did not stop, and the kids, Millie and Christine, did not stop as well. So yeah, that's what we do here at Women in Resistance. This is the story of 3 women who had to tell their stories. And what's the name of the book again? Just in case people would stop.
So there's a book that we wrote that is harder to find.
Okay.
And I say we wrote because lots of things change. So take everything that you read it with the common sense of the history of the times. But this book is by Joanne Martel, called Fearfully and Wonderfully Made. I should say this. Most of the stories of people like us have been written by white people, and definitely written through their lens. There is much work for you all to do to find our stories, to go through the archives, and to tell our stories with our own sensibilities. Stolen by white people, owned by white people, exhibited by white people, exhibited mostly for white people. And they are still the ones telling our stories. And yes, this is a picture of us. And there are many others that exist, but this is of us when we were much younger. I don't know if anybody who is watching has any questions. We're amiable. We will answer your questions tonight. We won't sing tonight, but we will answer your questions. So if you have a question, go ahead and type your question and we will answer it. I did tell them. Did you? Yeah. Did she tell you? It's Millie. Did Christine tell you that we spoke 7 languages? Yes, we did. 2 enslaved Black girls. Yes, we did. The thing that I remember most, well, this is Millie. The thing that I choose to remember most, because some things I really don't want to remember, was just how amazed they would be at our intelligence. No song. No, we don't feel like performing today. But we'll talk with you, but we're not going to perform today. But it was just one of the things I think that really pushed the ticket sales once people got to see us. Wasn't just that it were, yes, 2 heads, 2 bodies, whatever, with, 4 legs and they're conjoined. Certainly, yes, that's an attraction enough. But people would soon have got on board with that. What really got them going was how intelligent we were. I want to say to any young people who might happen to watch this, don't let their limitations limit you. They may not have seen our full humanity, but we saw and honored ours. And we, like I said, we were committed to being the best versions of ourselves. And we stayed that way till we took our last breath, always talking to the young people about the importance of developing their minds and doing the best with what they had.
Okay, I had some technical issues over here. So that said, we've come to the end of this week's episode. Next week, we'll be looking at the lives and times of Elizabeth Thoreau. Elizabeth of Thoreau, who she is, what her story is, we will delve into next week. Until next week, when we come through again, final word to Monemia.
To the parents, all our children are miracles from God. Treat them as such. Love the Black children. Don't ever give up on them. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. And good night and God bless. Yeah. That is it for this episode of Women and Resistance. Thank you for joining us in amplifying the voices of women who challenged injustice and changed the course of history. Be sure to subscribe, share, and continue the conversation. Together, remember, we honor the past, act in the present, and shape the future. Until next time, stay inspired and stay in resistance.